Okay, let's go.
I'm Nicole Lee, and welcome back to You Never Know, where we talk about life, career, change, and the stories of people who have taken the unconventional road and embraced the unknowns. If you like my content and podcast so far, remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you are watching or listening to this to help me create more relevant content for you in the future. It means so much to me. We're going to be doing something a little bit special on the podcast today, something we've never done before. We're going to be doing a podcast takeover. What that means is that I'm going to be handing the mic over to a guest host who will be asking the questions instead of me. And what that also means is that I will be on the other side of the conversation answering these questions and sharing parts of my journey that perhaps you never knew. So I'm super excited to be doing this, a little nervous because I'm not sure what's going to be asked, but I know it's going to be so much fun. So it is my pleasure to welcome today's mystery guest host, Daria Huck. Daria was born in Russia, raised in Germany, and is now a digital nomad that calls the US, Europe, and South Africa her home. From childhood in a theater to life as an immigrant, and climbing the corporate ladder most recently in the biotech industry, Daria is now growing into and owning who she truly is. Daria is now a professional coach and will soon be launching her own podcast, Rewilding, where I'll be taking over her podcast as guest host as well. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Daria Huck to You Never Know. Daria, let's do this.
Let's do this. I'm excited.
I know, and happy Valentine's Day.
Right. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Happy Valentine's.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day. This was your idea.
True.
Yes, this was your idea. I remember that I posted something on LinkedIn, one of my podcast clips, and someone tagged you in the comments. And then you DM'd me on LinkedIn and you said, I'm on the plane right now to Singapore, so let's catch up for coffee. And I'm like, I don't know you, but okay, let's catch up for coffee. So that's what happened, and we talked, and then you said, why not? Let's do a podcast takeover. So I thought it was a really good idea. So thank you so much for being here. So over to you, Daria.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for trusting me, right? I think it's a big proof of trust that you're taking over someone's podcast.
Yeah.
I remember I was sitting on a plane, actually in the airport in Doha, Qatar.
Okay.
So I just had my layover. I remember that moment sitting in the airport and looking at your podcast and thinking, that lady has a cool vibe.
Aww.
I think we would be a good match.
Oh, thank you. It's coincidence, synchronicities.
I remember I looked into your page, I looked into your podcast, and what I really loved was your story, how to step out of conditioning of societal expectations and so on. And your story resonated a lot with me. And that's why I thought, actually, it would be cool to hear your story on your podcast. And then you come to mine and you ask me your questions, right?
Super cool.
So if you trust me with that.
Yes.
Should I throw my first question at you?
Yes. I'm a little bit nervous because usually I'm not in the hot seat. But yes, fire away.
Tell me, as a good coach,
yes,
I would miss an opportunity to not ask, what are you nervous about?
That's a very good question, Daria.
I only ask good questions.
I guess because being vulnerable is still something that's pretty new to me. And I know that a lot of people think that it's very easy for me to be vulnerable because of how often I post on LinkedIn. But that takes a lot of courage because it's not something that I grew up with. You know, being in a more conservative Asian family, it's not as if like you tell people what's going on in your life, you know what I mean? So I think that whether it's writing on LinkedIn or doing this podcast, it took a lot out of me to actually say, I want to put myself out there and I want to speak my truth, because the why I'm doing it is much bigger than the person that I used to be.
Who is the person that you used to be?
I think someone who thinks that they need to follow the rules, who needs to conform to society, who needs to meet the expectations of my parents and my family, to someone who may not actually know herself very well and thinks that she needs to be the person or this image of a perfect woman in the corporate world. And to be more perfect than I need to be. Good questions. Good questions, Daria.
But what you said about perfection, right? I think it's also something very common for us women in general to strive for perfection, whatever culture we are from. And I'm speaking here also from my own experience, right? Because as you mentioned, I do live as a nomad, as a global citizen in different cultures. I'm born in Russia, a very conservative culture.
Yeah.
It changes a lot, of course. Today's Russia is not the place that I'm born in. When you say you grew up with this thought of perfection is how you define success, right?
Yes.
Can you speak more to that? So what does it mean coming from your culture, your upbringing? How do you define perfection here? And what are the expectations?
I'll speak from my experience, and I don't want to generalize, but growing up in Singapore, academic success is extremely important in society. And I don't think that's unique to Singapore, but in Singapore, you have been trained to, get good grades or excellent grades. I remembered having 96 or 98 marks on my maths paper, and that wasn't good enough as well. And you want to strive to get into good schools because, that mindset of if you go to a good school, then you're going to make it in life. And to a certain extent, the culture and the environment of your school does shape you to a large extent because you spend so much time in school. But it does make you as a child want to or think you need to always get good grades. So I think from a very young age, I was taught to always get, that I needed to get good grades. I needed to get into good schools so that I can succeed in life. And I think beyond academic success, I think particularly in a city like Singapore, social status, how much you earn, the job you have, the type of job you have as well, kind of makes people see you in a different light. And so I think for me, working in a top bank as well does train me in a good way as well to strive for excellence, but at the same time, thinking that I need to be perfect all the time. Perfect mom, perfect employee, perfect leader, and, have this perfect image of how you dress, what you need to be, to actually be viewed positively in society.
How does it feel to share that right now?
I think that it seems as if it was a part of my life that shaped me to who I am today. Because without that sharpening of that tool and to want to strive for excellence, I may not have, let's say, looked at details that I looked at today. So even, for example, this podcast, I'm really particular about how it looks, the quality of the production, the quality of the conversations, having guests that have a lot to share and that I can vibe with. So I think all of these add up to the fact that the experiences that I had in the past actually led to who I am today and the excellence that I strive for. At the same time, it also seems a little distant now because I've changed so much. And learning the hard way not to be perfect because life isn't perfect. And I think that you would only have that realization when things happen to you and when you go through different experiences in life. Because if your entire experience in life is linear and it's always up, 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 you always think, of course, everything has to be perfect. Right until I left banking, I thought everything was perfect. And therefore, it also made me quite judgmental, because if I'm perfect, why can't you be perfect, right? And I think only when things happen to you, for you, that you realize that, hey, life isn't perfect. I am not perfect. And therefore, why should anyone be perfect? You know what I mean? So I think that, number one, it shaped me to who I am today. But two, I've changed so much that I realize now that perfection is not possible. And imperfection actually is the beauty in life.
Imperfection is the beauty in life.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And what I really love about my way of living is exploring these new cultures and understanding exactly the concepts behind them, but also within them. And I love to learn about it now that you're mentioning the word perfection, and we have mentioned it multiple times. In your own understanding, obviously, but how would you draw us a picture of the perfect woman that the Singaporean society expects to see?
Interesting question. And I'm not exactly sure if it's what society expects of you now, or if it's something that's self-imposed because of how you grew up as well. So I think it's a mix of the two. And I think it depends on the industry that you're in as well, because not all, certain industries do put a bit more pressure on you being perfect versus others. So I would say that I think it's a mix of what society expects of you, what you expect of yourself based on how you grew up, as well as the job that you're in as well. I would say the perfect woman needed to be someone who is good at her work, who can manage, her work stress, her responsibilities, strive for excellence in her role. At the same time, especially if she has a kid, that you'll be a good mom, take care of the homework, still be there for the kid, and then also be a good partner, and then be emotionally available. So I would say it's a balance of being a high-performing professional, being a super mom, still looking perfect and pretty with all your hair and makeup and everything and no wrinkles.
Have it all together.
Yes, have it all together. Be fit and in shape, and still show up, as if nothing happened. And I think that for me was very profound when I had a kid, because I didn't realize that I had subconsciously had the expectation on myself to pretend as if nothing happened after I had a kid, and to go back to work after 4 months of maternity leave and just show up in the office like this. While you had to breastfeed, while you still had a crying kid at home, while you still had a team in the office. And now thinking back, looking back, it's so difficult. It is so difficult to do everything. And I think that sometimes we don't have enough compassion for ourselves, and we don't have enough compassion for the people around us who hold different roles in their lives. And it's the same as for men. I think, we all have so many roles that we have to juggle with. And sometimes it's hard to be perfect. Yeah.
I'm saying it every time. And also I'm saying it now to all the women out there, all mothers out there.
Yeah.
I really don't know how you do it. I'm not a mother myself.
Yeah.
But I think what you're describing resonates right now with so many women out there.
Yeah.
Because it's not only all the pressures that society puts on you as a woman, right? As a woman in a leadership role.
Yes.
But it's also then on top, also societal expectations towards you as a mother and how you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it makes me remember that at different stages of becoming a mom, you also have to figure out what's important for you. I remember when my kid was just born, my attention was fully focused on her. But then soon I realized that I was losing myself as well, because my life is not my kid. And even though I love my kid, so much, that it doesn't define my life as well. At the same time, some women do actually choose to have their kids be their entire world too, and that's fine for them as well. So I think that sometimes we think that we need to have a certain type of mom, of women, of men in any organization or in any society, because that's more widely accepted, or that's what you see as more common. But there are so many different types of people with so many different types of values and priorities. And I think what I've learned through this journey is not to judge people, that there's no right or wrong. You can be a mom that wants to prioritize a career, and that's okay. But it does not mean that if you do that, that someone else has to do it too. That someone else might want to prioritize the kids, and that's okay too. So, I mean, for me, yeah, I've learned so much. I've learned so much about how my values, my priorities have changed, how through the journey, I've discovered that I needed to be more of myself in order to be more fulfilled and happy too. Mm-hmm.
Did you manage to find yourself again?
Oh, so much more. Yeah, so much more. And I've, despite everything that has happened, and despite the uncertainty that I'm still facing right now, I would say I've found so much more of myself. And I think it's about remembering who you are rather than trying to find or reinvent yourself. Because I think what my daughter taught me, what she reflected to me, was that she reminded me of who I am. Because as a child, you don't have all these societal pressures and beliefs that have been programmed into you yet, right? So when I looked at her and how she expressed her opinions so raw, it reminded me that that was who I am. And through my self-discovery, through inner work, through journaling, meditation, therapy, and through pain, I mean, through going through, challenges in life as well, it made me reflect and remember parts of who I am. And I think one thing that I underestimated as well is catching up with old friends, catching up with classmates from the past. They know you very well, actually. I met up with my old secondary school classmates, and they're like, Nicole, like, you've always been like that. And I think that's really a big realization, that actually sometimes you forget who you are, and you have to remember it. It takes time. It takes a lot of work to actually remember who you are. But I think when you get there, whether it's by yourself, with a coach, or with a mentor or someone else, when you get there, it's pretty liberating.
You mentioned just now how you rediscovered yourself, right? Mm-hmm. How it is about remembering who you are or who you were in the past. Mm-hmm. What was your key moment where you say it shifted for you and you started hitting the road on that journey that you're describing?
Mm-hmm. It's very clear for me. I think it was leaving the bank after 13 years for a fintech startup. That was the moment which really woke me up, because going from a top bank to a startup was like crashing into a wall. I knew what I was getting into. I wanted it. I left mainly because I wanted to grow and I wanted to learn. I wanted to expand my scope, my experience. But it was much harder than I thought. It's like going from here to here. You have to do everything on your own. You have to. The environment is so different. The people are so different. The availability of resources. There's no process documentation anywhere. So you literally have to start from scratch. And I felt that my experience definitely helped me. But I think what it didn't prepare me for is the dynamism of what a startup is like, and the confluence of so many factors that actually affect you emotionally. It affects your anxiety, your stress. It affects how you show up as a person as well, because you have to deal with people who may be less experienced as well, and you have to have empathy for that while also being on top of things. So I think that was the defining moment for me. And because you face so much stress in your work and so much newness, and still in front of clients, you have to smile and be okay. On LinkedIn, you still have to post, and you have to still show up, and internally, you still have to deal with so many things because of everything that was happening. You then have to manage yourself so much better. And I think that's when I started to look inward, and then also to ask for help, because it was like I was up here, and it was really overpowering. So I think that now looking back, I needed that. I know it's it seems very weird to say that, because there was so much pain. There was so much pain because I think the amount of emotional support you need that may not be found in your existing groups in the past, because you had already left the private banking industry. A lot of them don't understand what you're going through. They don't, because first of all, they couldn't understand why you left in the first place. Because I took a...
Why would you leave?
Yeah,
right?
why
would you leave the safe space, the safe job, the safe corporate environment, the salary dripping into your monthly account every day?
Yes, and I was doing well, I was visible, but yet I took a pay cut and still had to put yourself through so much pain. Like, why would you do that, right? So, but I think I had to go through it to help me to learn to face all my limiting beliefs, to face myself, to face my past, to face, how I grew up, to face who I thought I was. Therapy helped me a lot as well. Meditation, journaling, and that's where I started my journey of healing and inner work.
And your journey of you never know, so stay open.
Yes, exactly.
Tell me about it. What is you never know?
Well, it comes from a very deep place in my heart and in my soul. It's the name of the podcast, but it represents so much of my life too. When I went through a very difficult time in 2023, 2024, podcasts helped me so much to listen to different perspectives, to talk about how to manage stress, to talk about spirituality, to talk about, how you as a person go through life. And I realized that while I'm not a book reader, podcasts were so useful for me to actually learn, to educate myself, to see the world that I never knew, that I never grew up with. So when I started this podcast, I was looking for a name, like many people, such as yourself as well. And I couldn't find a name that I really resonated with and that was not taken by someone else.
That's always a challenge. Find the idea that nobody else had yet.
Yes. So interestingly, I was telling the universe, because I couldn't find a podcast name. And for me, name is so important. Even in the past, in school or even at work, when I was in banking, starting a piece of work, writing a piece of work, if I didn't know the title or if I didn't know the vision, it was hard for me to immerse myself into the creative energy of what I needed to produce. So finding that podcast name was a big one for me. And the story is, I was meeting a lot of people via LinkedIn. I post a lot, so people reach out to ask for coffee, chat, Zoom calls. And I had a Zoom call with a lady from Mexico. She reached out for a chat, and I'm like, okay, why not? So I chatted with her, and she was telling me about her story, about how, as a Mexican, she took up Chinese language in university when no one else wanted to. And then she went on to say, but you never know, because, now she's one of the few Mexicans who can speak Mandarin in Mexico, and that's pretty cool and pretty niche, and it really gave her an edge. And I'm like, wait, stop. And I didn't tell her what it was for, but I actually have the picture where I wrote down the words, you never know, on like some random piece of paper. And I'm like, that's what we always say, right? In a conversation. And I was Googling it and seeing if anybody took the podcast name, which there were a few podcasts who took it, but with different variations. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care anymore. It spoke a lot to me, and that's how You Never Know came about. But I think beyond the podcast name, I also used it for the company that I just set up. And I think it's because in life, you really never know. You never know, for me and for many other people, is you never know what's going to happen if you took this route. You never know the better outcome that might happen for you if you decided to choose different, right? You never know what leaving something might actually lead you to as well. And I think that for me personally, it speaks so much to me because so much of how my life has been, especially in the past few years, has been taking that risk and taking a chance on myself. And it brought me to places, experiences, and people that I never knew existed. And that is pretty wow for me, because the people that I'm meeting, like you, Daria, right? Or, people on my podcast, people in my community, are people that I have never met before. And it is because of the choices that I've made, the inner work and the transformation that has been done inside, that actually draws a different crowd and different experiences to your life.
I remember me reading the name of your podcast,
Yes.
You Never Know, and then looking into your page. And the thought that I had was, wow, it's very brave. It's very brave to choose that name because, as you say, generally in wherever people live, it's just very human to not be okay with uncertainty. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest fear that I've ever encountered in my own life, but also in other people's lives, is uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And it's the biggest fear that I truly believe we need to overcome to really be able to live a more liberated life, to really live up to our full potential. And so what we do instead is we create this illusion of we can control life. We can control the universe. We can control the future. I mean, if you look at it in the corporate world, but also in business generally, what is the biggest piece of work that I feel most resources go into? Planning. Planning, anticipating, creating long-term business plans, predicting business outcomes, right? And I'm not saying there is no purpose for it or no foundation, right? There are analytics, there are analysts, there is data. We can do our best. But what I find difficult personally, and I think is really challenging, that we tend to translate that work part of let's create predictions into our everyday life. And we start sort of gaslighting ourselves, right? Into, I can also plan my life and I can control my life. And I can create a 5-year plan for my life, a 10-year plan for my life. And if I do, then life will start doing and operating exactly in that way. It's like programming a computer, but it's just not true.
No.
It's not true. The truth is you never know.
Right?
The truth is you can wake up and tomorrow something entirely different happens.
100%.
I mean, we've seen it all a couple of years ago, right? We woke up and all of a sudden there was a global pandemic. We didn't know. Nobody anticipated that. No. It was not written into any business plans. And I was working at that time at a global biotechnology company, which was at the forefront of fighting COVID. And we didn't have that in our business plan. Nobody did. The whole world didn't, right? Because it's uncertainty that we're living in. And the biggest lesson that we need to learn, I think, and my path showed me, the biggest lesson is to learn to be okay in uncertainty.
Yeah.
That's why I thought that you putting it out there as a title of your podcast, but also title of your business and what you do and how you help your clients, right? You never know. It's just super courageous. Love that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Daria. I used to be such a planner. Holidays, careers, not to the extent of having a 5-year or 10-year business plan or life plan. I didn't have that. But I thought I could control everything. And it worked. It worked because it was going to according to my plan. I think it's only when things happen that don't go according to your plan that you start to realize that it's how you respond to it that's very important. And now I live my life very differently. And I'm learning as well. It's not something that I've done for a long time. But living in the present moment, not worrying as much, even though there is a lot of uncertainty in many areas of my life, but not living as much in the anxiety of what may or may not happen, not living in the fear of potential negative outcomes, but really living in the present moment to the best that I can. And people often say that passion is an overrated word. I disagree. And passion can come in many different forms, but it is now what I'm applying to my life is knowing my passion and what excites me and acting on that passion. And the podcast is a very big manifestation of that because it gives me a lot of joy. Doing this, it gives me a lot of joy creating this and channeling my energy towards something that can inspire people, where we can share our truths, because we don't have many of these kind of conversations in Asia as well. So I don't know where this will lead me to, but I do know that people can tell when you're authentically expressing your truth and being who you are. And I think that's what we're all here to be.
Powerful words.
Thank you.
So what is it that you are doing with You Never Know? What is your why?
I have a very strong calling, especially, going through the ups and downs in life. I have a strong calling to share my truth and to help others to find theirs too. I think that we talked about how society, your family, national values, we can talk about how you grew up too, but all these things do add in layers and layers of beliefs and programming to your life and who you think you are. So that version of myself that I thought I was a few years ago was under all these layers. And I think that now becoming more of myself and sharing more of my truth, which we talked about, isn't natural for me because of how I grew up, is making me come across, or is making me more authentic, is making me connect more with my tribe, and is making me become the person that I feel that I'm meant to be. And so my purpose is to inspire people to find their truths, to be able to be happier, to be more abundant, to be more authentic, and to thrive in life, so that it basically you can thrive in all aspects of your life. And that could mean in your career, in your relationships, in your life, whether it's through public speaking, how you communicate, just to really help people to become a better version of themselves.
That's a beautiful why. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Yeah. What about you? I mean, what I wanted to find out was how being born in Russia and growing up in Germany, how that combination actually affected you growing up, and how much work you had to do to actually peel the layers?
That's a very good question and a very deep one. I think it's also a question that I have been busy with answering for myself over the last years, but also especially funny that you're asking it right now, over the last couple of weeks and days, to be fair, because I also was just yesterday on a podcast where it was about, I'm calling it feelings of immigrants.
Okay.
And it's not an easy answer. So for example, I don't identify as one nationality, right? I can say that I do identify with my Russian roots. I love the culture, I love the language, I love the cuisine, I love the art, the music. My father is a professional musician, professional opera singer, right? So I grew up in a theater. That's why I still very, very am in love with the traditional music and the culture behind it. Nevertheless, I do not identify with modern Russia, with especially its politics or whatever the societal status is. But moving to Germany when I was 12, that was a big challenge for me, which I'm realizing only now because it was such a different culture. I didn't speak German. I didn't know anything outside of Russia. So my family moved. I was a kid and I was dropped into school on day 7. Day 7 in a different country, no language, no nothing. And I remember trying to navigate my way through the school to the principal's office because my mom had to go to her school, German classes, at the same day. So I'm there in the middle of uncertainty, not knowing where I'm going, not knowing what I'm doing here or why I'm here, missing my friends back home. And I lived in Germany for 20 years, and I can say that I'm extremely grateful to Germany for everything because it provided us so much stability, so much safety, so much certainty. But at the same time, it is also, from my own experience, right, a culture that has a very clear image of who you have to be, how you have to operate. There are many, many systems in place, many, many rules that you have to follow. At the age of 14, I decided even to change my name to a German name. So I'm not using my Daria Huck. That's not the name that I'm born with.
Okay.
It's not my father's name.
Right.
We changed it to my grandfather's name.
Right.
So that it sounds more German. I mean, if you think about that, right, a kid deciding to give up on name, and you mentioned names are so important to you too, and you realize that.
Yes.
Right, how much pressure was there to integrate yourself in order to be included, in order to be accepted by society. So I think that also very much shaped my journey and my perception of myself. Being engraved in me, this thought being engraved in me of, I should not be Russian, I should be more German. I should speak a clearer language with less Russian accent. I should not have a Russian name. I should have rather a German name. And I'm speaking about a time more than 20 years ago, right? Germany has changed a lot now with so many more refugees and immigrants. Also, Europe has changed a lot. Now it's definitely much more inclusive and accepting. Nevertheless, I think that so many countries, and Germany including, have so much potential to be really welcoming, to be really inclusive, and to fully embrace the diversity of all of us, of each individual.
Thank you for sharing that. I grew up here. I was born here. I grew up here. So I can't imagine the identity crisis that you have to go through, immigrating to another country and then having to blend in and fit in and then sort of be the best you can be as well. And I think that affects you much more than you probably think. But the point I wanted to make was that inclusion is such a powerful realization that we need to have, because with inclusion comes cohesiveness, actually. With inclusion comes power. it's not actually excluding people or certain, races, genders, and different types of cultures that actually bring people together. So I think that's very powerful what you said.
I think we need to accept who we are. We just need to be able to look into us and accept all parts of it, even the ones that we don't like. And there are so many of us. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, there are parts of us that we don't like.
Yeah.
But accepting those is really where the journey starts, for me at least. And then the second one, embrace it. Embrace who we are. And this is, in my opinion, how we can create a more inclusive world.
Yeah. Showing up as who you are. And at the same time, reflecting and introspecting to acknowledge that while there are parts of you that you may not like now, what are you actually going to do about it today so that you can be the version of yourself that you want to be tomorrow? And I think that's extremely important because that's where we grow. And that's where we become a more evolved version of yourself so that you can lean into your higher purpose as well. Because those parts of you that you may not like and you accept it, may be the parts that weren't you in the first place. It may be the parts that you picked up along the way from society, from how you grew up, from your school, And these things need to be acknowledged, but at the same time addressed so that you become a more authentic version of yourself.
Yeah, and I think you described it beautifully, right? At the very beginning, when you said there was something in your life that was not the best part maybe at that time, but the question that you asked yourself was not rather, how can I avoid that in future or how can I forget it?
Yes.
Instead, you said, how can I learn from that and make it my strength today?
It took a lot, though, I must say. It took a lot for me to come to this point in time where I am starting to let go of resentments, of different people in my life that may have caused me discomfort and pain. And it's still a journey for me, but I wanted to say that it's not an easy journey to go through, to actually let go of these events that might have happened, but at the same time know that everything happens for a reason, and that reason can be to teach you something. It can be a lesson that you needed to learn. It can be something that you needed to correct in yourself. It can be a path that you needed to take. But I've learned that everything happens for you, and it is how you view the lessons, learn from it, that actually carry you further in life.
Yeah, I think I cannot agree more, especially on the part of switching from that some life happens to you and switching your mindset to, no, I own it.
Yes.
Right? It's my path.
Yes. I remembered particularly when you're in a big corporation, and you know that too, there are usually a lot of, different layers of dynamics. And I used to remember how I would blame other people for what happened to me and how I reacted to a situation. And that wasn't healthy, At the end of the day, how you respond is in your control. And it is much easier said than done. Much. And in that moment when you're so angry and, you feel like everything is against you, you might not feel that way. But I think that for me, learning to move from a life of lack to a life of abundance has been extremely profound. Remember we talked about it, especially between women, the dynamics between women can be different from the dynamics between women and men, or, men and men. And I think that has changed a lot for me too, supporting, women in their endeavors, cheering them on, knowing that if it doesn't mean that if you succeed, that I can't succeed too. In fact, we both can succeed because
it's the opposite.
Exactly.
Right?
People who resonate with you may not resonate with me. People who resonate with me may not resonate with you. And with that, each one of us has our own audience too. And we have our own tribes. And the world and the universe is so big and infinite that everyone has a place in this world. Everyone has a purpose, even if we may be on a similar path. And that's why I'm really grateful that you actually reached out, because it's part of my journey as well to want to support people, women, men, on their journeys, even if it may be similar to mine, because we can all grow and thrive together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt from the beginning on that you would be totally up for such a podcast takeover.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to welcoming you on mine.
Yeah. When is that going to be launching?
It's launching in a couple of weeks. It's April 1st. And if people want to hear about it, I will post on it post about it on LinkedIn.
Exactly. I'm going to put the link on this podcast too, so people can follow it. Yeah.
Sure.
I know that we're running out of time.
What are your words and your message to everyone who was listening today?
It's funny how you leaned in. I think going through the ups and downs in life have made me realize that almost everyone is going through something in their lives. And a lot of time we mask it in society, in the jobs that we are in, to portray that perfect image of ourselves that can never be achieved anyway. And I've seen a lot of that in my career and in my life. And I was one of them too. So you don't have to be perfect, because life is not perfect, and it's okay to make mistakes. Because only when you make mistakes will you actually learn from them. And in fact, these mistakes were meant to be made anyway, so that you can take the path that is meant to be more aligned with your truer self. And learning from them actually will help you to know what not to do, or what you don't prefer to do in the future. And I think last but not least is it's so important for us, especially in growing up in societies that value success in the material sense, to connect back to our hearts, because that's where we truly, deeply are. And when you connect back to your heart, you actually remember who you are. And that is where you harness your power from within, live a more authentic life, and to thrive in all areas of your life, from your career to your relationships to your personal life, to live a much more happier and abundant life. Yeah, that's very, very deep for me, and it's something that I am trying to live myself in this present moment.
Because you never know.
Because you never know. You never know where life will take you. You never know who's going to come into your life. And you never know, what's going to happen. Live in the present. Thank you, Daria. This has been really, really, really good. Really appreciate it. Look forward to be on your podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here.